tips is to get lots of light, preferably outside because it's a lot brighter. And that really regulates our circadian rhythm and helps us go to sleep at a decent time. And for those night owls, it can shift the circadian rhythm earlier by getting lots of light in the morning when you first wake up. And then potentially blocking light at night. So trying to, for all of us, we know, put away the electronic devices about an hour before bed. But potentially for those night owls, having blue light blocking glasses may be important to block out the blue light that can suppress our melatonin and make it more difficult to fall asleep. So that's a tip for some of those night owls. But in general, if you have the luxury to create your own schedule, I would say really try and just sleep more in line with your circadian rhythm if you can.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I am Nicolette Richer, your host of the Eat Real to Heal show, and I am so excited to have Dr. Amy Bender on our show today. Dr. Bender is a senior research scientist at the Calgary Counselling Centre, and she's also an adjunct professor, assistant professor of kinesiology at the University of Calgary. Now, Dr. Bender received her PhD and Master's of Science degrees in experimental psychology from Washington State University, where she specialized in sleep EEG. Now, with all of this research, all of this knowledge, she is a sleep specialist, and she's on our show today to talk about the importance of sleep, particularly in athletes, but really everything that she knows that applies to athletes applies to everyone, to new moms, to the elderly, to children, to people of all ages, walks of life, to everyone, because as we all know, you can't exercise your way out of a bad diet. You have to eat your way into health. And then adding movement is really important. But the one piece that people often take for granted and often abuse is sleep. And this is why we brought Dr. Amy Bender onto our show to talk about how vital sleep is for our health, for regeneration, for rebuilding our body, for repairing our body, because when we sleep, it's really the only time that our body is truly repairing and healing. So it's of vital importance that you learn the art, the science, and learn how to master sleep, because ultimately that's what's going to keep us living longer, living healthier when it's coupled with the right diet and exercise. Now, I know from my experience, when my clients turn to food as medicine and they start eating well, they end up automatically sleeping well. And I discovered Dr. Bender on the Outrun Rare website that was developed by its founder, Dave Proctor, who is running and cycling across Canada to raise awareness about rare diseases. And I love that he hired Dr. Bender to be on his team to help him as he was running 100 kilometers a day across Canada to beat a world record of 72 days of running straight across Canada. And he hired Dr. Bender to be his sleep specialist. And of course, many of you already know that I am going to be running and cycling across Canada in 75 days so that I can stop and meet with Indigenous communities, physicians groups, and youth to uncover the barriers to accessing clean, real food, to uncover the barriers to the knowledge around food as medicine, and to helping people remember that food is medicine and that it has the power to not only prevent chronic diseases, but also to stop, to arrest, and then reverse chronic diseases. And these are diseases that are caused by our lifestyle, which really represents 95 to 97% of all the chronic illnesses that are out there. Only 3% of chronic diseases are actually genetic, and that's including cancers. So if you're out there and you've heard yourself say in the past little while, well, I have diabetes because my parents have diabetes, or I have cancer because my parents have cancer, or I have heart disease because my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my siblings all have heart disease. Well, you might actually be saying that the only thing that is truly passed down and hereditary is the lifestyle, actually not the genes themselves. And that's been proven out over and over again through evidence-based science, evidence-based medicine, to show us that, you know what, it's really about changing the lifestyle. And one of the important factors that we need to change, in addition to food, in addition to exercise, is sleep. So what Amy has done as well, which is what I really love, is that she's helped develop the only validated sleep screening tool for athletes, and has implemented sleep optimization strategies for numerous Canadian Olympic and professional teams. Her current focus today is on how sleep and exercise interventions can also help improve mental health outcomes. As many of you know, my ex-husband took his own life. I have been witness to friends who have been attacked by individuals that have mental health issues because they were depressed, had anxiety, suffered from panic attacks, and were put on everyday mental health medications, antidepressants, antipsychotics, and actually became violent as a result. I am privy to friends who have family members that have taken their own lives as a result of the mental health medications that they've been prescribed by their medical practitioner. And they went from being thriving communities or thriving individuals in their community to one day, you know, after a few weeks of being on their medications, to taking their own life, despite there being no other evidence of wanting to commit suicide. And we know a lot of the side effects of these medications are hallucinations and multiple brain activities that look like psychotic episodes, momentary psychotic episodes. So I'm on a mission to help people understand that they can actually eliminate their depression, their panic attacks, their anxiety disorders strictly by using food. When the body is nutrified, the brain is nutrified. The brain can then fire appropriately, and there's clearer thinking, the brain fog lifts, the depression lifts, and people are actually able to make better decisions as to how to then move forward with managing their lives, which often don't involve the medications, or if my clients are on medications, they get off the medications. So I've been doing this work for the last 13 years, teaching people about using food as medicine. We know the ability of exercise to improve moods, but what a lot of people are not realizing is that food is the number one factor that you need to integrate into your life. Healthy food, clean food, real food, none of the processed, refined, ultra-processed foods that contain the refined oils, the refined salts, the refined sugars, the refined ingredients, the preservatives. Once you eliminate all of those and get an abundance of fruits, vegetables, legumes, grains in their whole entire form and start eating those, it's incredible to see how the gut microbiome shifts, the body heals, and then mental health status improves as well. So on our show, we're going to be chatting about that with Dr. Amy Bender. Also note that she's a former college basketball athlete as well. She has completed an Ironman back in 2009, and she is fit and healthy as she chases around her 3 young children. So this woman has experienced it all on all sides of being a researcher, a scientist, a doctor, a mother, an athlete, and she's here to teach all of us how to use sleep as medicine. Welcome everyone to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I am your host, Nicolette Richet, and on today's show we have Dr. Amy Bender. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here as well, especially because of the fact that you are a sleep expert in the world of athletic performance. And that's not a topic that we've covered on our show yet. And I think it's one topic that sleep in general that, often people overlook when they're trying to heal themselves, when they're trying to take care of their health issues, when they're trying to understand what is going on with their bodies, why aren't things syncing up and aligning, and they'll stay up all night long Googling, researching, as opposed to doing the one thing they probably should be doing, which is getting sleep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So how did you get into the world of sleep? I know that you did your master's in psychology as well as your PhD, is that correct?
Yes, yes. I started off actually as a sleep technologist, so I was working at just well, I guess before that, I went to my aunt's sleep lab. She was a sleep technologist at the time, and I was kind of looking to transition careers. And she brought me to her lab where she was working, where she would hook up patients with electrodes to monitor the brain waves, monitor heart, leg rhythms, muscle movement during the night, and then was able to score those channels to calculate what stage of sleep the person was in and how many different potential breathing episodes they were having during the night. So that really got me hooked. I ended up volunteering at any sleep lab that I could. I went and I volunteered, just observed overnight, watching what the sleep technologists did, and ended up landing a job at the Sleep and Performance Research Center as the lead sleep technologist. And from there, I was a sleep tech for probably 4 years or so, and where I was teaching research assistants how to hook up the participants with all the electrodes, scoring the stages for sleep, and then decided I really wanted to take it a step further, ended up getting my master's and PhD in experimental psychology with a focus on sleep EEG and the impact of sleep deprivation on cognitive performance. And then after my PhD, I ended up doing a postdoc fellowship at the University of Calgary, working with Canadian Olympic team athletes and trying to optimize their sleep for better performance. Currently, I am the senior research scientist at Calgary Counselling Centre, where we're trying to use sleep interventions for better mental health.
Which is, I think, what we need now more than ever in midst COVID, when we have so many people that are completely out of sorts and out of rhythm with their, their normal life and trying to find that new normal. I imagine that now more than ever, we need to probably clone you and the work that you are doing to help more people understand how they can help all these people in amidst this COVID crisis. Have you seen right now, just in the work that you're doing, have you seen a spike or a rise in mental health issues as a result of COVID, or is that something that we have to wait to sort of find out?
Well, we were looking at the data because we transitioned when the stay-at-home order took place here in mid-March in Canada. We transitioned to all online counseling. So it was a very fast transition for us, but we were able to, it went rather smoothly. So we're able to collect data during the time, obviously pre-stay-at-home order and during the stay-at-home order and post-stay-at-home order. And what we were finding actually is that levels of distress were lower during the stay-at-home order, which was very interesting to us. And obviously there were some people that did have higher levels of distress. So it wasn't everyone had lower levels, but on average, we found that there were lower levels of distress, less reports of suicide concern, less reports of substance abuse. But now we are starting to see, I think, the aftermath now over here, where schools are in session. We're starting to get back to normal up here in Canada, and I mean, you're from Canada too, so
Yeah.
so you kind of know. But we're starting to see more people coming in for counseling and virtually. So we are starting to see a little bit of the aftermath now that we're getting back to more of our normal, new normal, I would say.
Right. And with that transition from, the COVID, staying at home, the lockdown, to then phase 2 and people getting out and about, did you, do you think it's because the result of people just trying to balance this new life, or like, have you come to any conclusions as to why you're seeing perhaps a return to previous rates or something closer to that?
Yeah, we haven't explored that too much. I think during the stay-at-home order, there were less obligations for people, so that could have been a reason why there were less levels of distress overall. And just being able to spend more time with family potentially may be a reason for that. And now that we're having to commute back into work, I'm still working from home, which is nice, but a lot of people are having to commute in. And so a lot of those stressors that are occurring, and then on top of the pandemic, I think could be a reason for people needing more counseling during this time. And I think that we haven't even seen the peak. I feel like that we're probably going to be busier and busier as we get back more to normal, and then combine that with the pandemic, maybe a reason for people needing to seek out counseling.
Yeah, no, anecdotally, even just from myself, I mean, you're a mother of 3, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm a mother of 3 as well. And I know the minute school returned back, we were like, oh, this is going to be exciting, because I've been working at home, juggling kids and work, and I'm sure you have as well. And then all of a sudden, going back to school, we're adding a whole new layer of like packing lunches and trying to fill out school forms and managing our kids' expectations at school with wearing masks or not wearing masks and everything. So I know for myself, my sleep went from being spectacular throughout COVID to all of a sudden now being, frazzled and going to bed later, and knowing that I need to check that as well as my training increases. And are you finding the same for yourself, just anecdotally from you, or how do you manage your sleep?
Yeah, yeah, my youngest, so he's 3, and we just moved him out of his crib into a big boy bed. So we were struggling a lot with that, him waking up, and, but we're actually getting through that. So that's good. We're getting back to more normal. But yes, I mean, more obligation, having to pack the lunches, making sure the kids have masks, because where we're at, the kids need to have 2 masks at school. They wear it during recess, so just also, reassuring the kids about COVID and how that works is another added stressor, I would say.
I have so many questions for you, which, I know we only have an hour together, and normally we have a long form podcast, which ends up being about an hour and a half to 2 hours. But I definitely, the one question I do have for you before we jump more into the science about it and then transition into talking about sleep and athletes, because I know that's an important topic too for so many people, especially in the Whistler area, which is, the outdoor rec capital of the world. But what is it like for you to have so much knowledge about sleep, and then obviously every night knowing that, your sleep's probably going to change with having, your youngest being 3? Is it ever sort of self-sabotaging having too much information?
Yeah, that's funny, because I do have all of that knowledge at my fingertips, but yet I'm not able to control a lot of times whether or not I get a good night's sleep. But for me, I take a more, I guess, conservative approach. I know sleep is important. It's important for our health. It's important for our mental health. But I feel like our body can recover from these, occasional nights of sleep deprivation. And by the way, there was one study that showed that it takes 6 years to get back to pre-pregnancy sleep levels. So kids can be a challenge when it comes to sleep. But when you look at, are parents more at risk for quicker mortality? We don't see that in the research. So I feel like our body and our brain can adjust to acute bouts of sleep deprivation. So for me, I try and I take a bit of a hands-off approach. So a lot of times if I know I'm going to be going to bed late or something along those lines, I won't look at the clock. I won't try and calculate my sleep. I try and take a more relaxed approach for myself when it comes to trying to optimize my sleep.
Okay, that is really good advice, and I'm going to take that advice for sure, because I have read a lot about sleep as well and understand the importance of it, but definitely haven't dived into the research, as deeply as you have. So I like that more hands-off approach. So you were an athlete previously, or still? Would you say?
So I played college basketball. I played, or I did an Ironman in 2009. I did some mountaineering. I'm still an athlete, but not in that capacity. So currently I'm doing some running, 3 or 4 times a week. I do some running. I do hiking with my family. I do stand-up paddleboarding. So nothing too competitive at this point.
Right. And was it that being an athlete that helped you transition into also working with athletes and around sleep and enhancing their performance? Because I think that is such a fascinating career to be in. I'm just curious how you transitioned into that.
Yes, well, I noticed for myself, so I played college basketball in the early 2000s, so sleep wasn't a big deal at that point when it came to performance. But, my coaches would say, make sure you get a good night's sleep. Not even, and that was pretty much it. So I felt like there was a lack of information getting to the athletes. So a lack of awareness when it came to sleep and the benefits on performance. So that was really one of the drivers that wanted to get me working with athletes. And to just being an athlete myself, I've always been interested in sport.
Right. And so tell us about the difference between, let's say, the need for an athlete to have a certain quality of sleep versus, an average individual maybe who's walking 5 to 10,000 steps a day. Does an athlete need more sleep? Is it a different quality of sleep? And, what are you seeing amongst athletes basically in their sleep patterns?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think for the general adult, we want to aim for 7 hours and up. So between some regulation or some recommendations are between 7 and 9 hours. I like to make it more of 7 and up. So trying to get a minimum of 7 hours of sleep, which means you likely need to be in bed for more than 7 hours, probably more like 7.5 hours, because of the time it takes you to fall asleep and the time that you may wake up during the middle of the night. So really trying to prioritize that for the average adult is really important. For teens, we're looking at more like eight hours and up. And then the younger ages we go, the more sleep that we need. When we're talking about athletes, I would say most sleep scientists working with athletes do believe that they need more sleep than the average adult, just because of the wear and tear on the body, the mind, the cognitive load that's going on, the physical load. So just needing more time to recover. But I would say, in general, athletes it's very difficult for them to achieve a high amount of sleep and a good quality of sleep. So that's what we see in the research a lot, is that they aren't getting good quality sleep overall when we compare that to a control group or normal population. We see more challenges for athletes.
And why is that? Have you arrived at conclusions for that?
Well, it could be the impact of exercise. Like with a large amount of exercise, we may need, there's more cortisol, there's more stress hormones being released. So potentially making it more difficult for athletes to fall asleep could be a reason for that. It may be related to the timing of the exercise. So a lot of athletes potentially try and fit it in right before bedtime, which can work for some individuals, but in a lot of people, it can cause problems. It could be the personality type. I mean, if you have a type A personality, elite athlete, it could be that in those individuals, it's just more difficult to unwind. So having a pre-sleep routine would be important. I think there could be a lot of reasons for why athletes aren't getting the sleep that they need.
Yeah, that's an area that I'm really fascinated about, just because I'll be running and cycling across Canada next year in a short period of time, so 75 days. So it's 100 kilometers a day, no rest days, and really everything is about using. Yeah, it's going to be super exciting, and but also very scary as well, because I'm really hoping my body holds up, and I'm doing everything nutritionally to make sure it does. But I have noticed for myself since starting, when my training increased, that definitely my sleep is not as consistent as it was prior to my intense training. And of course, I analyze everything from a metabolic standpoint, like, am I depleted in magnesium, not enough iodine, what are the nutrients that are a factor? And do you do any research around that, as far as nutrient intake, and seeing, the different diets that athletes have and how it affects their sleep?
No, I don't do anything related to, I think we're a long ways away from that, actually. There are some studies looking at nutrients and how it relates to sleep, but it's mostly in the general population. So such as fiber is good for deep sleep, and carbs may help you fall asleep quicker. We haven't really quite gotten there with athletes. There's maybe been 1 to 2 studies looking at more of a correlational type study, not really looking at, if you consume this food, how will it impact your sleep in this way. So I think we're a long ways away from knowing that for sure.
That's exciting though, because it just means there's a whole new area for people to study. If anybody's listening out there and, happens to be in that world of research. I did read one study where it said that, when people, they feel that hunger craving at night, it's not a bad thing to make a piece, make some toast and have some carbs, and it'll help them fall asleep. And the article was great about explaining the metabolic action that's taking place to help people sleep better. So, where some people are like, do not eat after 7 p.m., this study was actually suggesting that it's okay to have, some carbs just before you fall asleep to help. So we definitely are a long way off too. I haven't seen a whole lot of studies. Now, you're on Dave Proctor's team, and for our audience out there, Dave is this incredible human being who has he's broken all these Guinness World Records. He's an ultra endurance athlete. For him, a fun day is to just go out and run 100 kilometers in about 4.5 hours. Like his time is incredible, but he is running across Canada also next year, and to raise awareness for his company, Outrun Rare, which is to help bring awareness to the fact that Canada needs a rare disease strategy. We're the only country in the world that does not have a rare disease strategy for individuals with these, rare diseases. So you're on his team. So what does that look like to be on his team? Like, what work are you doing? And do I need to have you on my team as well? That's the question I have.
Oh yeah. So So yes, I'm on Dave's team currently, and was on his team in I think it was 2018 when he attempted to run across Canada the first time. And it was very fascinating because he would call me up and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling to sleep. What should I be doing?" So I would give him strategies that he could do. And as a last resort, we had the option of him to take a sleep hypnotic. So that was in the strategy as well, because I know for him, he was very anxious about making sure the routine is on time and then he's getting to this area for this event. And I think that really, really brought a lot of anxiety for him, making it a lot more challenging to fall asleep. So a few times he did use a hypnotic when he needed to. And I'm not a medical doctor, but
What is
we
a
had
hypnotic?
just a sleeping pill to
Oh,
help
I see. Okay.
fall asleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had that set up so that he had that in case of those nights where he was very anxious. Another thing that we did for him was to make sure he had a really great sleep environment. And I think this is a tip for that anyone can use, because it locks in automatic behavior in the future. So you just have to make this one-time choice of optimizing your sleep environment, potentially getting blackout blinds, getting a nice eye mask, having earplugs that fit you properly, making sure you remove electronics out of the bedroom. And so for him, he was traveling in an RV, and so we really made sure that his sleep environment was dark, cool, and quiet was really key, and that locked in future behavior for nights of sleep down the road, where it's like, okay, well, my environment is good to go. Now I just have to work on being able to fall asleep and stuff. So I think that's a good tip for people, is to really optimize that sleep environment, make it like a cave, cool, dark, and quiet. And for me, it took me a while to realize this. I mean, I always heard that as a sleep hygiene tip. And it wasn't until I stayed at a cabin in Golden, BC, where it was just dark. It was in the middle of winter. It was dark. It was cool. There were no sounds. It was just amazing. And I'm like, wow, I really have some work to do when I get home, because it was like all of us slept really, really well. So I think that's key for people, is to have a good sleep environment, and that'll lock in automatic behavior down the road. Also for him, we were balancing napping as well. So um, he obviously was running a lot, but he was starting earlier on in the day. So he did have a chunk of time during the afternoon to potentially recover with a short nap, under 30-minute nap. So that was a strategy for him to help recover. And then obviously the non-sleep strategies that help with recovery, nutrition and massage and those kind of things were helpful as well.
That's amazing. I love that, you mentioned basically all the things that I'm not currently doing. So I'm going to, the minute this podcast is over, I'm running to my bedroom and I'm going to put up new curtains. And and definitely, I do find that sleeping in a cooler environment, and especially for women as well, as their hormones are changing. I mean, I'm 45 years old. And so I am starting to notice there's a moment in the night where I get a little bit warmer. And, I don't know if that's perimenopause or my liver's acting up, who knows, at this point, without actually getting in and studying it. But a cooler environment definitely makes a world of difference. And the no noise thing is interesting because of the fact that I think we all have the option to sleep with earplugs. And, I know people who do it very well, and they all often claim that they do have a great sleep, but we have the bear that's eating plums in our tree now, and then the rooster that crows in the morning at very early time. So our sleep is very much disturbed. So I have to go take care of that for sure.
Yeah,
Now,
I just to add on to that, I think I actually found out recently that a lot of hearing places, so that do hearing testing, can make custom earplugs for people. So that might be something to check out, because I know for me, I tried a lot of different earplugs, and there was like one pair that I found that actually fit properly. And I'm definitely going to look into getting a custom pair. And I think it was less than $100. So, it may be worth it to have those custom earplugs to help you sleep better.
Oh, I'm definitely getting those. I feel like I'm now just over that hump where my youngest is 9 now. And, she still might wake up, and all of a sudden just be standing at the end of our bed in the middle of the night because she wants to just jump in with us. But we're definitely past the point where I feel like I need to listen to, for the kids. So I'm going to go get some of those earplugs. And with sleeping, is there a time of night that is better for somebody to go to bed? I know we talk about living according to our circadian rhythm, and 10 o'clock seems to be that number, but in the research, has that been proven out, that there's a better time to go to bed?
It varies by people, honestly. There are so many individual differences, and it depends on if you're a night owl or more of an early bird. And the best piece of advice would be to sleep more in line with your circadian rhythm if you can. So, for example, if I'm a night owl, let's say I like to go to bed after midnight, after 1 a.m., that's when my melatonin is being released. My melatonin is maybe being released 1 to 2 hours before I go to bed. So for a night owl to go to bed at 10 p.m., it's not going to work. It could actually lead to insomnia because they're just not tired at that time. So sleeping more in line with your circadian rhythm is a good piece of advice, and it is one of, along with quantity, which we already talked about, sleep quality, and then timing is the third factor for optimal sleep. Trying to sleep in line with your circadian rhythm is important. For a lot of night owls, that is pretty challenging because society makes us, wake up early, have to be to work at a certain time, have to get the kids ready to get them off to school. So that can be challenging for night owls. And there are some things you can do if that's the case, such as getting lots of light in the morning is going to be important, actually, for everyone. That's one of my number one tips, is to get lots of light, preferably outside because it's a lot brighter. And that really regulates our circadian rhythm and helps us go to sleep at a decent time. And for those night owls, it can shift the circadian rhythm earlier by getting lots of light in the morning when you first wake up. And then potentially blocking light at night. So trying to, for all of us, we know, put away the electronic devices about an hour before bed. But potentially for those night owls, having blue light blocking glasses may be important to block out the blue light that can suppress our melatonin and make it more difficult to fall asleep. So that's a tip for some of those night owls. But in general, if you have the luxury to create your own schedule, I would say really try and just sleep more in line with your circadian rhythm if you can.
Just made me all of a sudden very excited for when my kids move out, because I am a night owl, and it's been the one thing I've had to battle for sure. It's that I can easily, like, my most creative time is 1 a.m. It's when, I do my best work, write my best emails. I can do 8 hours of work, I think, in the time between like 11 o'clock and 2 a.m.
That's awesome.
Which is awesome, but not when you're up at, 6:30 a.m. getting the kids ready for school. So it really doesn't work. So I've had to force myself to go to bed early versus my husband, who's like 9:30 guy. Like 9:30, he's got his pajamas on and he's heading upstairs to read a little bit before bed. And, and I'm the opposite. So that'll be interesting, down the road when the kids do move out. So one of the things that you mentioned was the electronic devices as well. And is that mostly for that blue light that's coming off the screens and how it stimulates our brain, or is it the what are the elements of our technology that are really affecting our sleep?
It's the blue light. It's two main factors. I would say the blue light is sending a signal that it's daytime, sending a signal to our brain to wake up, suppressing that melatonin. And so if you're timing that blue light at the wrong time, so before bedtime, then it may be impacting your sleep throughout the night. Now, I would say that the more light you can get during the day, that helps counteract how sensitive you are to light at night. So if you're able to, go for a long, and I'm not trying to promote electronic devices before bed, but I just want to point that out, that if you are getting lots of light in those morning hours, it does counteract your sensitivity to light at night. But it's not just about the light from the screen, it's also about the content that you're looking at. So is it alerting? Is it alarming? Are you looking at news feeds, before bed? So it's not just about the light per se, but it's also about the content that you're looking at.
Yeah. And especially during COVID, I mean, so many of the things that I saw people sharing, were a lot of disturbing things, not as hopeful. And so if you're falling asleep with that, in your mind and waking up to it too, because so many people grab their devices first thing in the morning, they have them last thing at night, which I know I'm guilty of doing. My husband's guilty of doing it as well. But, one of the things that we do as a family is really try and stay away from news, at the first thing in the morning and late at night, just so that our brains are not wrapped around that. And it made a real big difference for our kids as well, because if you have the news playing in the background, your younger kids are taking it in and interpreting it in a different way. And I did notice with my youngest daughter, when COVID first hit and we had the news on a little bit more than actually we didn't ever have the news on before while the kids were home, but it definitely caused a lot of anxiety in her, and lots of just, good questions, good things to discuss, but more than what a 9-year-old needs, for sure in their life. Yeah, no, so that's really good advice. So let's go back to talking about athletes, because of course it's, I'm being selfish here, with wanting to know more. Have you found that there's a difference in, when it comes to gender and sleep quality for athletes?
Ooh, that's a good question. From my current knowledge, there aren't a lot of gender differences when it comes to athletes per se. In the general population, though, we see women, females needing more sleep, getting more sleep than males, and females suffering more from insomnia. So the inability to fall asleep quickly, waking up during the middle of the night, which could also be hormone related. Whereas males tend to have more sleep apnea occurring, so stopping breathing during the middle of the night, although women can also have that as well. But yeah, when it comes to athletes, no, I don't think there's been anything out there showing differences between the two genders.
Okay, that's good to know. So I don't have to, constantly say, well, it's because I'm a, woman, and more just look at it from the perspective of like, there's probably other things I can do to make my sleep better, because I think it's so easy for people to want to blame one thing and, and say it's because of that, versus no, let's take some responsibility and like, let's get the blackout rooms, let's turn down the temperature in the room, all of that, get the custom made hearing earplugs and so on. So that's good to know. Now I love the tips that you gave to Dave, when he was feeling that anxiety and potentially needing the sleep aids at night. But I can hear people listening to this podcast and hearing that you mentioned melatonin a lot and just say, well, I'll just go and get melatonin then if my body's not producing it. And what have you found around people taking melatonin? Should we do it? For how long? How much? And are there any downfalls, side effects of taking it?
For melatonin, it's been shown to be useful for the night owls potentially, as well as people preparing for jet lag. But as an insomnia treatment or to help you fall asleep quicker, to optimize sleep, the research, there's nothing there really. So it depends on what you're using it for. Yeah, if you're trying to use it to just help you sleep better, I wouldn't recommend it. It would be more in those situations where we want to shift the circadian rhythm to an earlier time. And the thing about melatonin is that there was a recent study showing that what you're actually getting is, because it's an unregulated substance in Canada and the US, that it could be anywhere between minus 55% of what it's saying on the bottle, all the way up to 150% of what it's saying. And not to mention that also a lot of the samples that they did in this study showed contaminants such as serotonin. So you have to be really careful with what you're actually getting. And there was only a small percentage of the sample or the melatonin sample that actually the bottle was accurate at what it said it was. So that's another consideration too, is you have to be really careful about what you're actually getting. Now, tart cherry juice may be an option for people to optimize sleep and enhance melatonin. And there's been a few studies on that it's been helpful for people with insomnia. So tart cherry juice may be an option. Even kiwis, although, I mean, I think there's more research to be explored. There was one study with kiwis per se that found that they were getting better quality sleep when they ate 2 kiwis before bedtime. So there are things to explore, but I think people really need to be aware of, is there something else underlying going on that you should really get checked out? So if you're struggling to fall asleep multiple times per week within 30 minutes, if you're waking up during the middle of the night for 20 minutes or more, and this is occurring very frequently, if you're snoring, if you're stopping breathing, if your partner witnesses you stopping breathing, and then you're tired and fatigued during the day, this isn't something that melatonin or tart cherry juice is going to fix. It's something that you need to get checked out from a sleep professional.
Definitely. And I think that's really important that you stress that as well, because I went through a period after we have a bunch of plant-based whole food restaurants. And so I was running them on my own. My husband was a full-time teacher in the Waldorf school system. So which kind of means you're working from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. Sometimes parents can call if they have questions about their kids. And so we were busy, and of course we had these 3 kids running restaurants. It was mayhem, and I burnt myself out. I burnt out my adrenals. I developed heart arrhythmias, probably because I wasn't eating well. Not that I wasn't eating well, it's just that even though I was getting all our meals from our restaurant, which are very healthy, I was not eating them until, quite late in the day. So I wouldn't have breakfast. I'd skip lunch. I think I was living on like a couple cups of coffee a day and maybe a glass of wine at night back when I used to drink. And, it was definitely a recipe for disaster, and it did catch up with me. But that was one of the things that I experienced was heart arrhythmias. My breathing was erratic at night, my husband would say, and I had very sensitive skin. Like I was just inflamed, which my CRP levels showed that in my blood results. And, this was coming from someone who knows a lot about health, and it just really shows that you can burn yourself out when you're not, when you're going to bed like 3 a.m, because I was staying up doing cash outs, until 3 a.m. And that's when that really scared me. And I did talk to the doctor about, seeing sleep specialists, which fortunately though, just by, implementing some of the things that you said, like I started going to bed at 10 at night. I made sure I ate my breakfast, lunch, and dinner at regular hours. I was making sure I was hydrated. Like that was huge for me. And within 6 days, everything returned back to normal. My inflammatory markers came down. So it is easy to fix a lot of these things, but you do have to address them and take action, and so when do you see, and not all doctors will know to send somebody to a sleep specialist. And we have a lot of physicians that listen to our podcast as well. So for a doctor to refer someone to a sleep specialist, or can someone actually just make an appointment themselves? And when should they do that?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you're at. I know in Alberta, you can self-refer to a sleep clinic. So it really depends on where you're at. Now, if there are any athletes out there, I helped develop the athlete sleep screening questionnaire. So, and it's freely available online, and maybe we can put a link in the show notes.
We will. Yeah.
At centerforsleep.com, but people can go there, fill out the questionnaire, and then it'll give individualized advice and let you know, like, yes, there is a problem here. We should really seek help from a sleep professional. So that's an option for athletes out there. It hasn't been validated in the general public, but I think it could give you a good idea of if you really should try and see a sleep specialist. But I think, yeah, if the sleep problems are occurring multiple times per week, it's been going on for a month or more, and it's really impacting your daily activities, I would say definitely get tested for a sleep disorder. Now, going back to your story, I'm wondering, because alcohol a lot of times can cause sleep apnea symptoms where people will stop breathing during the middle of the night because it's a relaxant, so it closes the airway and makes more sleep apnea more frequent. So I'm wondering if you stopped alcohol too at the same time when you made all of those changes as well, and maybe that could be another reason why your sleep was improved.
Yeah, and that is something I'll never know because I did so many radical things all at once, and this is why we have a scientific method, which is there to test, certain variables. And I had multiple variables. I worked on my liver. I changed my diet fully to like no refined foods, no refined sugars, oils, or, no salt. I did that. Just ate fully like very well cooked foods so that it was easy on my digestion. So I scanned my whole body and I really went from like, okay, if my digestion's keeping me up, what will we do? If sleep is, poor sleep habits, what will we do? So that's when going to bed at 10 o'clock at night, came in. I got rid of the coffee. So, was it the lack of, the excess caffeine in my body? In which I did have a DNA test a few years later, which actually showed my body does not clear caffeine as fast as it does for the general public. I stopped drinking, of course. And not that I was even a big drinker, but even a glass of wine, I noticed would definitely affect my sleep. So I just got rid of all the alcohol. So lots of different variables. But the great thing is that within 6 days, everything self-regulated, and my heart arrhythmias went back to normal. I had a test for that. Everything was great. So it does show the body's ability to recuperate and regenerate and heal itself quite fast, right? Yes. But it's true. I like that point about alcohol. So for all the people out there who know that I'm a huge no beer, which is just to see what would your life be like if you didn't drink for 1 year. It's a fun little challenge, and I did it. And now, unfortunately, I've taken it into be like no more alcohol in my life, which is actually a good thing, and I don't miss it. So I encourage everybody to see what that does for their sleep. Now, for the athletes, one of the questions that I have for you is about, so does getting better quality sleep and quantity, does it really truly have a significant effect on their performance?
Yes, I mean, we do see improvements in reaction time, we see improvements in mood, we see quicker sprint times. So yes, it can have a very good impact on performance for sure. I did a study with speed skaters, and we found that their time, so we looked at what they were doing normally at baseline and what their times were during the train or the trial. And then we implemented all of these sleep interventions, like trying to put in a nap, trying to get 30 minutes more of sleep per night, also using blue light blocking glasses at night, and found that their times were significantly improved. So yes, it can have an impact. Related to that, I think a tip for people could be leading into an important competition to get more sleep in the week or two before that competition. And the research has shown that your performance will be improved. So a lot of times athletes get a poor night's sleep before that really important competition. And if you're getting more sleep leading into the competition, it'll kind of counteract the impact of that poor night's sleep right before the competition. So that's another tip for people, is to bank sleep leading into an important event. And it could even be a night shift that you're working, any period of time where you're going to be experiencing sleep deprivation. Could be related to travel, although not as much right now, but any kind of those events that lead to more sleep deprivation, if you can get more sleep leading into those, you're going to be performing better during.
Okay, that is really, I love this banked time piece, because it actually makes me feel less anxious as well. And, the night before a big event, because already, even though I'm not leaving till June 1st next year, I already just thinking about the night before, like, am I going to wake up in time? Is, my body going to feel good? Do I have to have the perfect night's sleep the night before? And, and does the whole entire 70 days go to whatever hell if I don't get that good night's sleep before? So that is actually really, really good to know as well. And especially for a lot of people who, even, if you're an entrepreneur, you work in any kind of job actually, where you have to give any type of performance. It doesn't have to be athletic, just knowing that you can bank that sleep is good. And so that should be a motivation for everybody to want to do better. So, to wrap things up here, because I know you have a lot of work to do and you have to get back to your beautiful life of research and helping athletes perform better. What are some last minute tips that you have for people, or what are some resources that, I see that they can definitely do that sleep assessment, which we're going to put that link for sure, but what are some other things that you would like to leave with athletes and non-athletes of our world?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about getting lots of light in the morning. I think that's super important for people to help regulate their circadian rhythms and improve sleep quality at night. We talked about limiting the alcohol, limiting caffeine. I know you kind of touched on that, but that I find is a good challenge for people to really not be dependent on, that cup of coffee every morning. So for me, I think my youngest was 6 months and I decided to go decaf. I decided to get off caffeine. I had been in graduate school where I was consuming a ton of caffeine, and I just decided, let's just give it a shot. And so I went off caffeine. It took a couple of weeks and I did it kind of gradually. So if I was really tired, I'd have a black tea, in the afternoon. And then I kind of switched to maybe green tea, and then I eliminated caffeine altogether. And it took a while. Yeah. And I was really tired during those 2 weeks without it. But after the fact, I slept amazing. So I think that may be something for people to try and experiment with. And currently I'm, like, for example, I think I had a green tea this morning, and I alternate between green tea, herbal tea, and half calf coffee I'll have occasionally. So there's Kicking Horse coffee here in Canada that has
so delicious.
Yeah, it has half the caffeine, and sometimes I'll do like decaf with that, so then it's only a quarter of caffeine, because we know that it can stay in your system for a long time, and especially depending on how you metabolize it, as you had mentioned, a coffee at noon could still be the equivalent of a black tea right before bedtime, and you would never really have a black tea before bedtime. So that's something to consider for people. I think also preparing your mind and body for sleep. So we need some unwinding downtime. We need to wind down before bedtime. So taking that hour before bedtime to take a warm bath or shower, which is shown to reduce the time it takes you to fall asleep. Potentially writing a to-do list, so you offload those thoughts off your mind, get them on paper. That helps people fall asleep quicker. Doing a gratitude journal, doing relaxation techniques, so breathing techniques such as the 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 7, breathe out for 8, and you repeat that 4 times, can help activate that parasympathetic nervous system, which makes it easier to fall asleep. And then the cognitive shuffle is another one that I really like. So you think of a word such as bedtime, and then you imagine all the objects that you can, starting with B. So ball, baby, bus, banana. When you can't think of any more objects, you go on to the next letter. So E, eagle, egg, ear. By the time you get to the end of the word, hopefully you'll be sound asleep. And so those are some techniques for people to incorporate into their wind down routine. Getting the electronics out of the bedroom. For me, I store mine downstairs, so I don't have my phone by me. And if I need to set an alarm, I'll just set it on my watch. So usually my 3-year-old's really good at getting me up on time. But yeah, taking that time to unwind, have a pre-sleep routine to help prepare your mind and body for sleep is an important takeaway for people.
Yeah, that is an amazing list. And what we're going to do is actually just create a downloadable PDF that just has all of that in there, and linking to the assessment tool that you have as well. And just because those are all really beautiful things. I love the cognitive shuffle. I'm going to do that tonight for sure. I am going to get my electronics out of my room because it is a terrible habit that we have. And it's time to get those out. And I'm going to wean off the coffee, because anytime I've ever stopped drinking coffee, I've had the best sleeps of my entire life. Like and I wake up actually feeling so refreshed, as opposed to waking up feeling like you need the coffee. And it does take time. So I just have to let everybody know, do not go cold turkey when you're weaning off caffeine, because of the fact you have receptor sites that have been developed in your brain to hold the caffeine molecules. And the minute your body doesn't receive that within 24 hours of your last cup of coffee or caffeine hit, then your brain it's like a drug withdrawal, basically. And for a lot of people, it can be very, very difficult. You get migraines, you get quite anxious, you get angry, and it's important to just slowly wean off. And I've read the research that shows about 3 weeks of weaning. So where you're doing all of those techniques that you suggested, and just taking it down a little bit per day over 3 weeks until you're completely off, then you won't have to necessarily experience any of those drug withdrawals, because caffeine is a drug. But you can then test and see how your sleep goes from there. You have been such a wealth of information. I'm going to be contacting you afterwards just to see how I can get you on my team. I wasn't considering having a sleep specialist until I had done that podcast with Dave Proctor, but I think it's really important for any athletes that are out there, or any very high functioning individuals, even in the business world, where you have a lot of stress on your plate, and I'm running 5 businesses, doing a podcast, doing my training. It's a lot. And I realize after talking to you, the importance of having an expert on your team who can just remind you things that you can do, so that in the end, you don't necessarily have to fall into, any of the sleep aids that a lot of the doctors will prescribe before trying any of these other things that you suggested. So thank you for being on our show and taking the time. I know there's going to be so many people out there that are going to be forever grateful for this information that you shared with them.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Wonderful. So thanks everyone. Stay tuned for next week's podcast, and definitely check out all the web links below so you can get in touch with Dr. Amy Bender and all of the tools that she provides, and her clinical assessments as well. So what an incredible podcast where Dr. Bender just gives us the straight up facts on how to improve our sleep. So if you're out there suffering from poor sleep, from insomnia, from waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning and having your brain turning and you can't turn it off, it's important to go back and implement all of these steps that Amy talks about in her show with us today. Now, you know what to do, folks. You need to share this podcast with your friends and family members that are also suffering from sleep, because there are gold nuggets in this podcast that can help your loved ones get a better sleep starting today. So it's important to hit the share button, send it over via text or email, encourage your friends who don't know about podcasting. I'm still always shocked when I hear that people don't know that podcasts exist, because really what podcasts are, it's just one more opportunity in the world to share information, to receive information, to learn, to study, to discover new tools and resources, or simply just be entertained. If you're already sleeping well, then you know what to do, but note that there are many people in your community, in your family, amongst your friends that are not sleeping well. So start the conversation with them today. Start asking questions. You might just even ask the next 5 people that you see, hey, how are you sleeping? Do you ever wake in the middle of the night? How do you find, how easy or hard is it for you to fall asleep at night? Do you wake up feeling refreshed or tired? Instead of starting a conversation with, what do? You can actually start a conversation about sleep and then see where that takes you. And you'll discover new things about the people in and around you. And then you can be an activator in helping the people around you get better sleeps. Now, before we sign off today, jump on over to Facebook and sign up for our 22 million strong training tribe, because that's where you can follow my training as I run and cycle across Canada and get ready for that tour that's coming up on June 1st next year. You can also head over to our fundraiser campaign, where we are raising funds that will enable me to stop and meet with Indigenous communities, with BIPOC communities across Canada, with physicians, with youth, to help people remember that food is medicine. So it is a big endeavor. I'll be doing this across 75 days. It's going to take a lot of resources, tools, people to help me get across Canada. I'm going to be doing this on my own, cycling and biking, cycling and running. But if you want to join me, it's time to start training today. So I've hired one of the best endurance athletes, Chris Hout, and one of the best endurance nutritionists, that's Lucky Seguin, and from Fit Vegan. So I have these 2 incredible coaches that are helping me every single day, every single month, get ready for this tour. And I'm sharing their training program with you for free. And what's happened as a result of doing this is that we have people that have never ridden a bike before, that have never walked more than 1 kilometer, that have never run more than 1 kilometer, who are out there running and cycling for hours a day and hours a week. And it's incredible to see. We have Kath Faraci on Salt Spring Island, who's actually put a group of women together. She's gathered this tribe, and they're out every single day training 6 days a week. Some of those people in her group, amazing women, have never exercised before, and they're out there moving their bodies every single day, running for sometimes 2 to 2.5, 3 hours, biking from anywhere from 1 to 5 hours is what they're up to now, when just 8 or 9 weeks ago, they weren't doing anything like this. So jump on over to our 22 million strong training tribe on Facebook and get access to my plan and follow me, join me, and so we can collectively learn together and help people all across Canada learn about food as medicine and to reverse their chronic degenerative diseases. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being on our show today. Stay tuned for next week's episode. It has been a pleasure. Have an incredible week. Bye, everyone.